After 2 years of working on it, I am finally finished the 20-gallon Moss Bridge aquarium, and this is how I made it. It all started when I got married and I moved in with my wife. Naturally, I wanted an aquarium, and so I picked up a used aquarium on Kijiji. The aquarium came with sand, some decorations, the tank stand, a hood, an old light bulb, and 4 goldfish. These were humble beginnings, but I had a vision. In terms of equipment, I replaced the old light with this Nicru LED dimming 24-hour light. Very nice, but not too expensive. Although I was happily surprised to see that once I removed the lid, it was a rimless tank. Making a lid for it from what was available was a little bit difficult. After some trial and error, however, I was able to come up with this lid after cutting some plastic that the lid came with. Moving forward, the aquarium uses a top fin internal filter rated for the 20-gallon size, and you're not going to believe this, but also a top fin automatic heater. All through my last semester, I was drawing up plans for what this tank might look like and what might live inside of it. As you'll see later, I chose to be quite conservative with the kind of fish that I put in, just because of the rimless lid not allowing me to have anything too boisterous. These limitations for what kind of fish I was able to put in the aquarium actually granted me more freedom for how I could scape the aquarium. I focused mostly on the use of play sand, a somewhat larger grain size for my naturally colored gravel, 3 medium-sized pieces of spiderwood, and some larger stones. Early on, when I considered this being a Coolie Loach tank, I had much more sand and much less gravel, but as I considered that Coolie Loaches might be a flight risk, I began to add more and more and more gravel until we are where we're at now, which I think is 20 pounds of gravel. Unfortunately, this meant that all those larger river stones I had were swallowed up. But fortunately, having this amount of gravel on hand allowed me to scape it so that there was depth on either side of the aquarium, and in the middle there was a river of sand. This deeper gravel bed would also go on to benefit the plants that I ended up with. The driftwood, instead of being bare and exposed, was now swallowed up, creeping through the cracks of the gravel. And to join the two pieces was a bridge. You may also notice these baked clay circles beside the sand. And you may recognize them as what you receive your plants in if you buy them from a big chain pet store. And on that note, let's talk about the plants. The most notable phase of this aquarium, about a year ago, was when I had it swamped with salvinia. That's this floating plant that you see. Many of my fish, and especially my gourami, loved these floating plants. But all the other plants couldn't stand them. In fact, they were dying because of them. And so the decision was made to have this as a floating plant-free aquarium. You may also notice that the stem plants, the sword, and the val are also gone. My guess as to why these plants didn't thrive in this aquarium is because of the gravel. The lack of nutrients and the massive spaces between grains of gravel made it so that it was very hard for these plants to develop strong and healthy roots. Furthermore, their high light demands made me have to choose between either them or the lower light cryptocorynes and anubias. I think it's safe to say that I made the right call. In substrate like this, the swords suffered, but the cryptocorynes conquered. And this led me to focus on other rhizome plants, like Java fern and Anubias, as well as mosses, like marimo moss, Java moss, and Sesquiterceng. But with everything on the cusp of doing so well, I made a critical error. I over-fertilized the tank, and I put the lights up way too high. The moss bridge became overwhelmed with algae from the inside out, and I ended up having to cut it all away and start over. For all the other plants, their leaves were smothered in algae, and they began to die quickly. This brings us to the livestock. As with most, if not all of my aquariums, I started it off with shrimp, a nice large colony of wild Neocaridina shrimp. With no predators in the aquarium, the shrimp were able to breed to their limit. The 3 ember tetras present in the aquarium were no threat to them, but the next inhabitant would be. This cute little yellow fish is my male honey gourami. For as long as I had him, he transformed the aquarium. Both his personality and his bold yellow color made the aquarium something that couldn't be ignored, especially for the shrimp. The addition of this honey gourami also solidified my direction for the aquarium. That is, to have a specific color palette. From this point on, every fish had to have some hint of orange or be a neutral color. Over the months, I began to fill the aquarium with ember tetras and added a small school of celestial pearl danios. The amber tetras proved to bring a strong orange to the aquarium, while the celestial pearl danios, despite not having as much orange, still drew from it and enhanced it with the amount of personality they had. And the honey gourami brought it all together by having great personality, that orange color mixed with its bold yellow, and a larger presence in the aquarium. Things seemed to be pretty good, but I wasn't done yet. As with every aquarium, I like to have that one fish that you really have to look for. I knew that one day I wanted a camouflage aquarium full of fish that blend in perfectly, and one of those fish is the banjo catfish. But the banjo catfish is a little bit too big for an aquarium like this, and its burrowing habits, which I loved, would wreck the scape. But what if there was a mini banjo catfish? Well, there kind of was. The anchor catfish, or Asian stone catfish. So I ordered them, and after waiting months, they finally showed up and I bought a trio. After quarantining them and putting them in the aquarium, I didn't see them very much after that. And I was disappointed to see that, unlike the banjo catfish, they didn't burrow at all. Finally, the stocking was complete, at least for the fish. As far as invertebrates go, I was noticing that my shrimp were being killed almost to extinction. This was likely a combination of the moss having to be regrown, the honey gourami hunting them, all the other fish hunting them, and then the anchor catfish hunting them at night. Even the assassin snails were hunting them. Oh, right, did I forget to mention assassin snails? There were assassin snails. In fact, I was breeding them in here for a while, but the eggs never hatched, and I think the anchor catfish are to blame for that. And speaking of snails, I was noticing that the algae issue was not going away. The shrimp, although I tried to introduce more, they just weren't getting the work done on the flat algae. And I was kind of scared to introduce an autosynclus or a hillstream loach because there were still gaps in this custom lid, and with no rim, it wouldn't be too hard to jump out. So I turned to everyone's favorite alternative for flat algae, the nerite snail. Unfortunately, when I picked up the nerite snail, it brought with it all of its flatworm buddies, and to this day they still infest my quarantine tank. So I added my nerite snail to the 20-gallon in hopes that it would completely fix my algae problem. I crushed up chicken eggshells so that its shell would remain healthy, and I put it right on top of the algae so it would know where to start working first. But despite everything looking good, the nerite snail died a few days later, which seems to be my luck with nerite snails. But you know what snails have never let me down? At least not in terms of eating things? Ram's horn snails. And because I know that they can't self-clone, I took a baby from one of the other tanks and I put it in the 20-gallon. Within a couple months, the algae was pretty well cleaned up. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wow Matt, things went pretty well there. I mean, you lost a nerite snail and you had some algae issues, but nothing more than that, right? Well, we have had some serious problems. The honey gourami, probably due to overfeeding, died a few months ago at the age of only 2 years old. Although I limited its feeding to just a couple pellets a day, it was stealing food from the other fish, and the bloat got too far gone. With gouramis in the future, what I may choose to do is separate them during feeding or switch to a more live food-based diet. We've also had some issues with the amber tetras. I've bought probably 20 over the last couple of years, and many of them have passed away. I think we're down to 10 now. The one fish that is doing very well in this aquarium, despite it being at a pretty high temperature for them, are the celestial pearl danios. Apart from my oldest male having a slightly disordered swim bladder, they're all doing very well. And lastly, the anchor catfish, the fish that many of you know me for. Well, unfortunately, we had one jump out a few months ago. It was very unexpected to have an anchor catfish jump out when all the other fish tend to be more prone to it. Despite the anchor catfish looking very cool and growing in popularity, I'm not sure it's a fish I'd ever keep again. As the plants have grown in, I've seen less and less of them, and this makes it very difficult to know if they're eating well or at all. To this day, I just wait until the lights turn off, put a few pellets in or bloodworms, and hope for the best. Every once in a while, I'll come in with my flashlight and catch them eating, but over the last few months, it's started to feel like more and more of an inconvenience, especially when I see them so rarely. That all said though, I am loving the Moss Bridge Aquarium. The plants are bright and healthy, the fish are colorful and active, algae is no longer something that gets out of control, the shrimp are back to breeding again, and it has been an incredible inspiration for the projects that I have planned for the future. So what do you guys think about this tank? Were there things that I got wrong and you would have done differently? And what do you think that we should put in this aquarium next? As always, if you guys like this video, leave it a like. If you want to see more aquarium showcases like this, as well as care guides and updates, subscribe, and I will see you guys on a Sunday.